boogeyman. Don't let him come too close to you, he'll catch you if he can. Just pretend that you're a crocodile, and you will find that boogeyman will run away.
All right, and hello and welcome back, everybody. Hello, YouTube. We are back again today with another one of our nostalgic deep dives. Today we're going to be diving into the dark and mysterious world of the Invader Zim show and its creation, along with this, the struggles it took to get it going and off the air and why it eventually got canceled. First video we're going to be taking a look at here is Why You Still Remember Invader Zim So Well by Nerdstalgic.
You're a hideous blob of stolen organs! I've been working out.
I never took the Invader Zim being like super dark. For some reason, this was just funny to me back then. But I could see now why, especially somebody, a young kid, let alone like adult, sees this and like sees how fucking crazy this actually is.
I think it was Dark Harvest where it happened. I was recently rewatching Invader Zim, and I got to Dark Harvest, and it hit me. Somewhere between Zim harvesting the organs of school children and this joke where an office worker's mouth literally becomes a dog food dispensary.
Yeah, some of the imagery in this show was out of pocket at certain points. You could definitely tell that, like, yeah, the original creator had much darker themes in some of his stuff beforehand, because yeah, some of it definitely sticks with you.
I came to a kind of revelatory understanding.
Like, I'm pretty sure in that same episode he like replaced somebody's like heart or something with one of those toy like moo canisters that like moves when you like turn them upside down. Shit. Crazy.
The gruesome, the grotesque, the sickening can be beautiful. Now, I understand there's an enormous sum of irony in that statement. I also understand that those words and beauty are usually mutually exclusive. But yet, as I sat there in complete awe of this children's show that somehow had the balls to literally turn itself into this horrifying spectacle of murder and body stuffing, I couldn't escape this feeling that what...
I mean, like, insane. That is like a whole furnace. Traffic cones, it didn't matter what. He was just switching out whatever. I completely, yeah. That is actually kind of insane.
Spectacle of murder and body stuffing.
And I
couldn't escape this feeling that what I was watching was art. Dark Harvest is the show at its absolute most chaotic, and in my opinion, at its closest to its creator's vision. It's where I began to understand the grotesque beauty of Invader Zim.
You're full of organs, aren't you? Why, yes. Yes, I am. And you wouldn't notice if you were, say, missing a few.
Invader Zim was not really designed to be a kid show. In fact, it was designed as the polar opposite. This is Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. It's a limited series comic created by Jonan Vasquez.
I mean, literally, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, what did you expect?
It's a horror comic, very much aimed at adults about, well, murder. It's also great. From its visuals to its sparse and engaging narrative, it also led to a spin-off book, a 4-issue series titled Squee, that followed the misadventures of a kid and just so happened to be as dark and excellent as Johnny. Well, a Nickelodeon exec took a liking to Squee and asked Vasquez, who had no animation experience at all, to come up with a new idea for a show. In 1 hour, while lying in bed, he conceptualized and created Invader Zim. And what Vasquez envisioned was, as he put it, not a show for kids, but a show for him. And he had to fight to make that show. And that show was...
Okay, well, Dad, we can go to Flurry's now.
He's inside out.
Show. And that
they
show
really
was...
be showing some wild stuff.
No, we can't go anywhere with him like that. Family night is cancelled until his organs are inside him again.
There is not another show in this era of television that was somehow allowed to turn a character inside out, have its intestines become its body, and be dragged like a dog on a leash across the screen. This is pure visual stimulation, but it's precise. The sequence lasts just over 10 seconds. It doesn't overstimulate the viewer, it doesn't stick around to become sickening. It happens so fast that you genuinely wonder if you saw what you just saw. And the image, because of its split-second nature, becomes the moment you continue to fixate on. You focus on that moment almost to recall it. It impacts you like seeing a striking piece of modern art because it's elusive in a way that understanding art often is, but in this case, that elusiveness is literal. Like this scene, where his eyes are gouged out and new synthetic eyes are placed in their stead. It's disgusting, but you don't see it. You imagine it. You conjure it. It's what makes the way this scene is animated so beautiful. It's a horror you help to create. Vasquez would say in 2018 that the show was preoccupied with an obliviousness to horror that allows horror to be normal, to be its characters and world's status quo.
I mean, they pulled that off, I would say, because most time we watching this show, like, it didn't necessarily feel like a horror movie or anything. I mean, like, everything was gory for sure, and like way more like what's the word? Darker themed than I feel like I realized as a kid. But like you said, since it was so normal in the world of the show, it wasn't as jarring as if it was like in something like a norm that would have like normal morals in it, I guess.
This allows the show to present its disturbed moments as moments, instead of long, drug-out spectacles.
Boom.
It allows them to be a shadow, or a 10-second fever dream, because to their characters, to its world, this is ubiquity. This is their normal. Take Nick. Nick here was created as a reference to the smiley, kid-centric network of Nickelodeon.
Jeez, a giant drill in his head.
And the demands they made of the show's creators. This probe, shoved into his brain, is designed to force him into a constant state of happiness. He's in constant pain. It's terrifying, but to Zim, and to those that come in contact with Nick, it is what it is. Again, a world that normalizes terror, which in fact here is what makes the image of this kid in pain, being mentally decimated, so wonderfully horrifying. Zim just doesn't seem to care.
It's great! I never want to leave this magical place. I'm so happy.
But sometimes the visual horror is founded in sheer chaos. Take the episode Door to Door. These things being shoved into these kids' mouths are sausages that look like bugs. In fact, you can still see one of the bugs on the wall. That's because they were originally designed to be roaches, until Nickelodeon decided that was too disgusting and forced the change. In the very same episode, this elderly woman projectile vomits dust onto a beheaded gur, and we're introduced to a race of doll-eating monstrosities. The key to all this absurdity is it lies in a simple, tropey, and often generic premise. Door-to-door sales. School fundraiser. Girl Scout cookies. The episode has little to no meaningful structure. It has next to no prevailing plot. It is pure anarchy. And Zim uses this anarchy and simplicity as a technique with which to deliver shocks. So often things...
Huh? What is this? Who are you? Who are you?
I say one of the best clips right here.
Simplicity as a technique with which to deliver shocks. So often things dive into absurdity or fall into chaos so that you lose your previous understanding of where things are headed. So instead of being comfortable with what's happening, you're instead being exposed to a confusing discomfort, an unfamiliarity making the imagery all the more shocking. A good example of this is lice. This episode's foundation is a simple premise that's been explored dozens and dozens of times in animation and television. There's a breakout of lice at school. And yet, instead of the episode following the traditional tropes, it turns into a story of monster-based villainy. And just when you think you know how it's going to end, you're greeted with this.
The world will never have to deal with the threat of lice again.
Yes, that is a lice-killing weapon that sheared Zim's skin right off his body. It's shocking, but it's so satisfying to not know it's coming, to not understand what's happening, to not expect this moment. Because you think you've seen this story before. You think you know how this episode is going to play out, the sitcom trope of a school breakout, but you're wrong. Or Career Day, an episode about, you guessed it, a school career day. An episode that somehow manages to escalate into this glorious Akira reference. You think you understand the show until the moment where you don't. Gross out humor or horror often falls flat in animation because it's either poorly set up or better yet, it's made to be the substance of the piece or show. The only reason you're watching it. Zim knows that to succeed with shock is to make sure that you, the viewer, believe you're one step ahead, even when you aren't. Because that confidence makes you vulnerable.
I am Throbulator! I am a creature of pure headache!
Rob you later.
Yeah, my head!
But to create these horrors in this aesthetic, every second became a battle. Remember Nick, the walking Nickelodeon reference? He was created out of spite. Invader Zim was consistently hampered by Nickelodeon, the network. Characters weren't allowed to die according to the network, so episodes had to be rewritten, or things like this had to be defiantly placed at the end of an episode. Div was actually meant to be killed off permanently in an episode and replaced with a new character, but the network wouldn't allow that to happen either, so the entire course of the show had to shift. But it even changed the visual nature of the show. Nick refused to allow blood splatter in multiple episodes, forcing the team to rethink certain sequences.
I mean, understandably,
certain bits of violence. Like here, Keith gets chased by a squirrel and falls, but in the original version, he was supposed to fall off a building into an electrical line to be electrocuted. Nick didn't like that. Nick wanted to rethink Div's clothing because trench coats were too reminiscent of a recent and terrible event, so the team had to fight to save his aesthetic. They even had to fight to save the character when Nick wanted to cut him for not being funny or likable enough. Invader Zim wasn't happy. It wasn't
weren't they gonna kill him off anyway?
And every step of the way, creators fought to maintain their vision. Every boundary they got pushed back on, they pushed in a different, almost defiant way. The horror in Invader Zim, specifically the horror that is Nick, is a response to everyone that wanted Zim to be something.
Yeah, I guess that would be annoying too. Like, you plan to kill this character off, and then they fight you tooth and nail to say like, no, you got to keep him or whatnot. And then like a season later, they're like, yeah, so Dib, we're gonna kill. Like, oh, we've already completely changed the story just to fit him back into the story and whatnot when we wanted to kill him off, and now you want us to get rid of him? No, like,
What's wrong with it?
Less cheese! More macaroni. Less macaroni. More cheese! More cheese and macaroni. Too much macaroni! Ooh, perfect! I hate macaroni and cheese.
yeah, it's I can definitely see that coming down the pipeline.
It wasn't. And I think in an almost a romantic way, Nick is the best example of Zim using its imagery to actually say something substantive, to show that horror can still send a message.
No! It's horrible! Oh, God, it makes me so happy!
And yet, I think the case of Bloody Gore is the best encapsulation of the strange, defiant, anti-culture horror that is Invader Zim. An image of Bloody Gore was created and then forbidden to be aired by Nickelodeon. So, animators behind the network's back snapped the image into single frames across the last season, only able to be viewed by viewing the episodes frame by frame. It's Zim's last bit of anarchy, its last moment of opposition, the show's last attempt to maybe subliminally drill its way into your mind. Zim was more than its imagery. It was an excellent story, a sci-fi comedy that was vast in scope and even more interesting in nuance. It was great because it succeeded beyond its horror. It succeeded as sci-fi, as a narrative, as a character study. But Invader Zim also had awful ratings, was, as its creator put it, monstrously expensive, and then it was canceled. And yet years later, its less than subtle horrors are still burned into my brain.
It needed to be on like Adult Swim or
unrivaled
something,
in
honestly.
animation. There is art in horror,
Comedy
art in
Central,
grotesque, and art in its execution. It didn't care what the network wanted, it didn't care what its audience wanted. It was a show with a surprisingly unified vision. It managed to let the art, the grotesque, speak through all the censorship. All these years later, I think it's clear that Zim did succeed in taking over the Earth, in commanding humanity. The world of the gross, of the scary, is Zim's world. And I'm just happy to keep living in it.
Yes, yes, Lord of Humans! I will rule you all with an
that is it for today's episode.
you. Oh my god, Gert is the best. Cool though. Let me look at some clips from that. Okay, Nerdstalgic with a quick little deep dive on the Invader Zim. I have another one here from our dear old Jordan Fringe, also dove into. Okay, so this is the struggles on Invader Zim here with our friend Jordan Fringe. We continue.
It's no secret that Invader Zim is visually one of the most uneasy shows to watch. I truly mean that in the best way possible, as I think Invader Zim molded my love for horror films and video games that go above and beyond the Call of Duty to make me tense up in disgust and awe about what I'm looking at. It's easily what you remember the most when looking back or thinking about Invader Zim. Those moments of pure WTF energy that make you question if this was a show for kids or not. In fact, the show had quite the pushback from the network, Nickelodeon, for many instances throughout the show's run, but at the same time was able to creatively and sometimes directly in your face get away with so much. So I wanted to take a look at the show itself, how it was able to get some of those moments okayed by the network, and what pushback the show faced. So keep your organs on your insides and your eyeballs in your head. Let's talk about the struggle of Invader Zim.
So many dogs!
So how did we get here? By that I mean moments like this, or even this. Well, that all goes back to the creator of the show, Jonan Vasquez, who I share a birthday with. That's not important to you, but it is to me. Jonan created a comic book series called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, and if that title doesn't immediately give it away...
This is what we already looked into in the last video, and so we're talking about here. I'm going to see if I can find physical copies so we can put onto the shelf back here.
Yes, he was in fact a homicidal maniac. Shocker. The visuals evoke such a distorted view of something chaotic, something that some may find grotesque, yet it was gripping and had this pull to keep you engaged. From here, a spin-off comic series was created called Squee. It continued the darker theme engaged.
Even is that right there? Like, that's some crazy... I can't see it. Maybe it's for the best. Like, that's crazy. Oh wait, y'all can't. Okay. All right.
From here, a spin-off comic series was created called Squee. It continued the darker themes and feelings that you'd have reading Johnny, but what was extra special about these comics in general was that it caught the eye of Mary Harrington, a producer at Nickelodeon who was looking for the next slightly edgier cartoon.
He does kind of look like Dib.
She was hooked on the comics based on the visuals and characters themselves and contacted Jonan, giving him a chance to pitch a new animated series for Nickelodeon.
I mean, to be fair as well, like I was talking about how like it is a cartoon, so it's not surprising that on the kids network that, you know, they were vetoing a lot of these choices. But at the same time, y'all went to and brought the guy that is known for this shit. How can you be mad that he was doing him and was like trying to show his most direct vision?
And with having no experience dealing with
that looks like that looks like a teenage Dib right there.
With animation, he said yes, and Invader Zim would be that pitched show. The idea for exactly what Invader Zim would be took him 1 hour before he knew this was the direction he wanted to go. But this journey wasn't easy beyond this point. His origins and storytelling mixed with his visuals are distinctively horrifying in the best of ways, but maybe not so much to a kid's show, leading to a lot of pushback from Nickelodeon on a constant basis. Episodes would constantly have scenes either reworked or cut in general in order to make the episode episode viable for network play. The relationship between the network and those working on Invader Zim would be described as a little dysfunctional. There was just a conflict in personalities, intentions, and modus operandi. The reality was just not a great fit, and yes, it was a problem. These statements come from writer of the show, Eric Trueheart. While a lot of moments in the show were completely scrapped or cut from the final product, there were some moments that they ended up keeping in the final product, but in a workaround way that made it okay for the censors and made it more horrific for the mind. Sometimes not showing
why the
and
parents were
implying
robots
the
and
horror
stuff.
is scarier for your mind to fill in those gaps of what you don't see. So the subtlety, or the lack thereof, is what ultimately gave the show its specific uniqueness. On top of all of the weird you still get to see on screen. But what would be some of those moments or workarounds that caused the team working on Invader Zim to clash constantly with the network? Let's take a look.
Oh, there's some crazy stuff.
Zim, the green guy, will return. We warned ya. He's short, he's green, he's back. Invader Zim.
So there was quite the amount of stuff cut for time or cut for not being suitable for the network, and I can't really show you what those ideas were. It would just be me telling you what they are. So instead, let's take a look at what was able to get through after some workarounds from the Invader Zim crew. These examples can be found as quickly as the first episode of the show, The Nightmare Begins, with a blink and you'll miss it moment where inside of Dib's fridge there is a milk carton on it with some slightly legible text that reads, "Rob Hummel is meat." Rob Hummel
like
is
the
one
missing
of the show's
kids.
writers, but originally the milk carton was going to consist of a young girl with "Find Me" written on it, in reference to missing persons being advertised on milk cartons starting in the 1980s, called the Missing Children's Milk Carton Program. Nickelodeon wasn't too fond of having this, regardless of how quickly in the shot it would be, so it was changed to then reference Rob. The episode Parent Teacher Night featured a few moments with Gurr in which what he was watching on TV needed to be changed, from the cartoons he was watching originally being that of 40s cartoons featuring drinking, smoking, and weapons all on display. Of course, this wasn't going to be able to slide, but even as something as small as the word diarrhea being shown on the screen needed.
It's funny that they say this because I could definitely see that happening in Amazing World of Gumball, like today.
To be changed to a red color instead of the brown color it originally was, because Nick didn't want the word to relate closer to the color of what the subject matter actually is. Replacing the content on the screen in general was a bunch of random things that is too quick and too much for one to comprehend what is being shown, and we also get stuff like this.
My spine!
Yeah, that's one way to say it. In Walk of Doom, we get to see an example of how the relationship sometimes would be between those working on the show versus the network and their demands. This came from a sign that said, "Welcome to Mexico," as Zim exited a taxi at the end of the episode. This would be changed to say carne, the Spanish word for meat, as Nickelodeon found that the "Welcome to Mexico" sign mixed with the visuals on screen offensive regardless of Jonan's background. The crew wanted to make this feel offensive in pursuit of Nickelodeon letting them use their original idea, but Nick approved this. In Bestest Friend, the character of Keith was planned to land on some power lines after falling off of the roof, leading him to be electrocuted. Now, while characters being electrocuted seems like a staple cartoon trope of bygone years, in more modern times this was significantly toned down, especially by Nickelodeon, who would consider this as an imitatable act. So in order to work around this, the crew had a few ideas of how to have Keith get hurt in pretty bad ways, like him getting hit by a car and mangled all up from it, which, yeah, Nickelodeon didn't like that either. But what they did do was
looking at you.
more genius, and a moment where we really get to see the implied horror aspect of the show blossom from. Keith does end up falling off of the roof into some...
Now that I think about this, probably would have done well on Cartoon Network with like Courage, Grim Adventures, and all that. And honestly, it could have, well, Disney had some stuff on like Jetix, but they were like weird stuff like Creepy. The Adventures of Creepy, what was it? Yeah, what was the one with the mummy? Like the Pharaoh, Amumu, no, King Tut or something like that. Amumu, fucking League of Legends, Jesus Christ. But yeah, so
power lines, but all we get is a continued view from the rooftop as he falls, and then an explosion with a torturous scream from Keith. It's about your mind filling in the gaps of what you think just happened. So with that episode and the instance in Game Slave 2 where Iggins was shown or implied to be killed off, they were forced to find ways to make it show that this was not the case somehow by adding voice lines or extra scenes to prove all is okay, with Iggins literally bursting out of the elevator wreck accompanied with a title card and a guitar riff. This was all added in after the elevator gets cut and we see a title card saying "The End," before we fade back to an extra scene depicting his survival. Obviously, Nickelodeon wasn't a fan of any character being killed or implied that they were being killed, so during these moments where there wasn't an easy workaround and there needed to be some sort of compromise, the crew would do something like at the end card that they would say no characters were harmed in the episode, even if they clearly were. The back and forth between Nick and the Invader Zim crew was always this constant battle of you can't do this and you have to change that. And with the creators' visions always being tweaked, the crew found fun ways to poke back at Nickelodeon, whether it was somehow still getting away with some pretty messed up things, just having to go about them extra creatively to get past the censors, or they would constantly and directly put it in the viewer's face through the character of Nick, reflecting the happier tone that Nickelodeon wanted infused in all of their cartoons and to be more appealing to a wider audience.
That's so funny that's so directly on the head. Like, even his shirt is like, has the little Nick splat. I never peeped that connection. That's hilarious. Because I do remember he was always getting messed up. He was always like one of like the main test subjects for Zim. Him and his big smile, that gigantic row of teeth. And I never ever peeped that he was an allegory for Nick. That's amazing.
The network wanted more Rugrats type of shows rather than something like an Invader Zim sharing the same network. There were smaller things like in Door to Door where some kids were going to be eating cockroaches, and this was changed into them eating meat instead, but some roaches can still be seen in the frame to convey the uncomfortable, grotesque nature of the situation. In Battle of the Planets, the car pileup was changed from being on fire to just not being on fire. In Future Dib, the perpetual energy generator was supposed to explode into a mushroom cloud, but instead just continues on to open a space-time rift.
Is that where Dib was supposed to die? I really wonder what the series is going to be like what Dib did. And like what new character they were going to introduce. Was it going to be like the new Erkin, the chick? Was she going to be like the replacement for Dib? An actual like good nemesis? I mean, I think her plan also ended up being like weird at the end too. But
sometimes the crew and Nickelodeon agreed on a few things, like in the episode Hobo 13 where the character of Scooge would have to eat his own skin to survive, but both groups here found this to be a bit too far and just downright disturbing. Due to real life events, a few things in the show would be changed or decided against, like the design of the character Dib, who wears a black trench coat, which Jonan fought for not changing the character at all, especially with the amount of times Nickelodeon pushed for Dib to not be a main character, or to lighten him up a bit. With other tragedies, a whole ending was redone after airing one time on air showing New York getting turned into rubble, as well as an explosion at one point changing from red and orange and yellow to a green explosion. Another big thing that Jonan really wanted to add into the show was blood splatters within different and more violent scenes, specifically in the Bestest Friend episode, but technically a more unsettling image would be left in various episodes of Invader Zim,
Bloody Gur.
leaving a fun, almost creepypasta-esque hidden image to find. Bloody Gur. Yes, this image of Bloody Gur is real and made its way to television unnoticed by the network on a number of occasions. Originally, the concept was never intended to be included in an episode of the show, as they all knew it would be rejected. But since it was never handed to Nickelodeon for approval, there was not really a no ever given. So Chris Graham, an illustrator on the show, and director Steve Russell were able to sneak just a small singular frame of this image into the episode Bad Bad Rubber Piggy. Now, the only way to have caught it is if you think you saw something and claim it to be there. Later on in interviews, this would be proven as a true thing hidden within the episode, sparking so many to try and pause it at the exact frame to get the image of Bloody Gur, which, when you see it, it is extremely faint and barely able to be made out. No wonder this was snuck past Nickelodeon executives, and it wasn't easily caught by the masses either. But this whole thing became a lot more fun once it was revealed that this image of Bloody Gur was put into random points hidden even within the last 14 episodes of the show. The Bloody Gur was the single frame drawing that Chris Graham drew and I was putting into the show at random points hidden within things. It is very hard to make out, and I am not telling where or when those frames are. You have to be a master to see Bloody Gur even with a frame-by-frame VCR. If anyone finds it, let me know. He is in several places through the last 14 episodes. Nickelodeon.
Jeez, I would say, yeah, back when it was just like VCR recording or whatnot, there was no way you were about to find that. But nowadays, it should
was
definitely
completely unaware to this, and it became a scavenger hunt after it was confirmed to be real for fans to go and find these frame-perfect moments to see Bloody Gur. In fact, what I do
that
find
one I
pretty
can
interesting
see.
is
The other
that
two I
after
did
the
not
show
see.
was over and Nickelodeon found out about this.
Okay, I kind of see it there. Okay, I think that's the eyes. I definitely don't see it here.
Slipping past them and put into broadcast, they didn't really care as it was too quick and so faint that there would be no way a kid would even notice it in the first place.
Right.
So this standalone PNG of Bloody Gur is a legit real image that made it into episodes after all, as a nice last laugh from the crew and something for fans to hunt for and speculate on for searching frame by frame through those 14 episodes. A nice little extra piece of legacy that the show was able to leave behind.
So,
Let's make a biscuit.
I'm not going to be doing that because what? That is almost impossible to find. Like what?
Alien bent on taking over the Earth.
Creator Jonan Vasquez based the show on real-life experience.
Wait, what?
In the end, Invader Zim went on to become a cult classic for many who were brought up with.
These are your real life experiences, Mr. Vasquez?
In the end, Invader Zim went on to become a
Sir.
cult classic for many who were brought up with it being on air, as well as the rise in popularity it had in the later 2000s. Who were brought up with it being on air, as well as the rise in
Real life experiences, sir. Abraham Lincoln. I don't even know who that is. Beethoven, Mozart. That Harry Potter, they're flying on a broomstick.
popularity it had in the later 2000s, early 2010s
Hey,
with fashion, thanks to
the
places
scene
like Hot Topic,
kids.
which helped parade the popularity of
Grr.
Invader Zim even further, even if
I
it
want a
had
grr
ended
hoodie
its
still.
official premiere of the remaining 6 episodes back on TV in 2006.
To
Although
this
with
day.
the ratings of the show being what is to be believed the ultimate downfall of it, it was surprisingly and genuinely fun to have a sequel movie released in 2019, as Nickelodeon was having some legacy sequels to movies being released on streaming services like Netflix.
Deserved, mind you. And I thought it was supposed to be getting another one as well. I thought it was supposed to get 2 movies. But oh my god, so good. And the fact that the ratings for the show were terrible, I mean, like I said, it makes sense it being on Nickelodeon. I feel like if it was in a better place, it would have probably done better. But at the same time, I don't know, it could just be the subject matter in general. Like, maybe not a lot of people like that dark, cringy, random ass humor.
Enter the Florpus was a nice throwback and really just gave fans of Invader Zim one last satisfying ride in this messed up world Jonan created for us. I think for kids media, there is room for horror shows or scarier shows, something that challenges your visceral response. Without shows like Invader Zim, I may not have found my love for grotesque bloody horror movies, or from Are You Afraid of the Dark to my love of tension-building horror with a sense of helplessness. Growing up, the media you're surrounded by shapes and molds a lot of your tastes into what you end up having a like or dislike for. While yes, there are moments in Invader Zim that make me question if I should have seen that at a younger age or not, the show was something special that was able to capture an entire generation with wonder and disgust, and I mean that in a good way. Tell me your thoughts on Invader Zim in the comments below. Were you affected by it at a young age? Did it help build your enjoyment of the offbeat path of horror entertainment? Did it make you want to skateboard? Yeah, that's right, skateboard. So while this isn't a sponsor, for transparency, I want to tag this as such, but a lot of people have reached out about the skateboards I have and have shown off, from all the Pokemon ones to the SpongeBob board, beautiful works of bringing to Marvel. I consider guys to check out all the time. And the Invader Zim board is a limited time drop with only 175 boards made in a penny. Find pretty cool as well. On for more content like this, click the join button, become a member to help support the channel. Follow.
Thank you, Jordan Fringe. That was a good one as well, as always. Another banger. Right, and so that was our Invader Zim deep dive today. We're going to be continuing with stream. We'll be watching a few other reactions to some different shows. I'll probably try to get those up and running on the channel as well after this. But yeah, if you enjoyed, definitely follow, like, subscribe, you know, check us out over on the Twitch at Afromations_. And thanks y'all for watching. I'll catch y'all next time.